What's up, guys, and welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, then welcome to our little corner of the internet. Today we're going to be watching a video titled America's Perfect Anti-City. I have no idea what an anti-city is, so I guess without further ado, let's see what this video is about.
Look closely at a map of Savannah, Georgia. What do you see? Or better yet, what don't you see? A major city, but with no tall buildings, no identifiable downtown, no central park or square surrounding a city hall or county courthouse.
I gotta say it. From this angle, it kind of looks like Finland. Just a little bit.
This clearly isn't what a typical American city looks like today, especially one that's as old as Savannah. And that's because when this city was founded, it wasn't founded.
Wait, isn't Savannah in, like, Georgia? Why does it look tropical? Why is there a palm tree? Why does it look Spanish? Why does this look... What?
Founded to be a city at all. To figure out why, let's go back to London in the early 1700s. At the time, the British were looking to establish a 13th colony in mainland North America, a desperately needed buffer between the colonies in the Carolinas to the north and the encroaching territories of Spanish Florida to the south. In 1732, a group of wealthy English merchants and politicians called the Georgia Trustees were granted a
I've never been to England. That looks beautiful.
charter by King George to establish that 13th colony, which they named Georgia after the king himself. The Georgia colony had to be both heavily fortified, self-reliant, and uniquely free of slavery. The latter was because Spain had made a habit out of turning British slaves into soldiers, emancipating them, and then weaponizing them to fight against the British. The Georgia Trustees, led by a man named James Oglethorpe, created a detailed plan for how to go about settling the Georgia colony. These men were tasked with creating a society from scratch, pretty much the closest thing to playing God anyone has ever gotten, and they got experimental. Their plan was for an egalitarian society, where land was equally planned and distributed from day one. It would also be self-governing with no central leadership, no industry, no economy, no trade, and no social hierarchy whatsoever. This vision for an idealistic society built from scratch became known as the Oglethorpe Plan. The foundation for the Oglethorpe Plan was really in its urban planning, for lack of a better term, because it was anything but urban. See, 18th century cities were unequal by nature, formed by...
I am so confused by these city, images. This is from London as well, and it looks like Italy. Like, what is going on? Why are the houses different colors? What happened? I thought London was all grey.
Hundreds, if not thousands of years of social, demographic, and economic change. Cities expanded organically based on class, industry, geography, government, and so on. So if Savannah was to be truly egalitarian, it had to embody the opposite of all of that. It started on paper in London, but it really took shape here, starting in 1733, when the colonists began to lay out Savannah's very first wards. It's how the Oglethorpe Plan conceptualized its utopia. In hindsight, they were incredible. One ward was composed of 4 tithing blocks, as well as 4 trust blocks, arrayed around a central square, complete with wider civic streets running through and around the square, and tighter, smaller, alley-like lanes dividing up the tithing blocks. Tithing blocks were where the houses were built, while the trust blocks were reserved for public use, things like churches, schools, public markets. The Oglethorpe Plan was set up to where colonists worked to sustain themselves, but also worked to produce exports back to England. Cash crops like rice and deerskins. Merchants, tradesmen, and working-class settlers, regardless of status, all lived side by side within each of the town's tithings, with no single plot or house larger than the next. Once a plot of land was assigned to a specific colonist, it couldn't be sold, rented, or mortgaged, only inherited by a male heir. The town squares in the center of these wards were particularly interesting. They were largely utilitarian, used as training grounds for men on militia duty. The colonists built 4 wards in the first year of settling Savannah, and then 2 more.
That is so cool, and then it's still like that? That's... Whoa! I don't know what happened. I almost fell. That's really cool, though.
Over the next decade, for a total of 6 pre-Revolutionary War wards. The townspeople also established 3 broad streets, acting as perimeters, to make sure Savannah wasn't encroaching on native settlements or necessary farmland. Eventually, as more people moved into Savannah, the colonists grew less content with their quality of life. Subsistence farming was proving extremely tedious with the scorching southern heat and humidity, coupled with the fact that they had to supply sufficient exports back to England, and it all just seemed to break the colonists' morale. Most of the colonists thought that they were given a bad deal, that the setup was just unfair. The residents of Savannah knew full well that the other nearby British colonies were thriving with slave-based economies. By the
way, again, this is one of those videos where I'm just tuning in, I'm just listening, I'm learning, so I don't have much to comment, at least for now. But this is really, really interesting. I think you guys sent me, this reminds me that I asked you guys if, like, there's a video of how New York was built, like a timeline. Like, I wish there was a machine that you could use when you go to the street to, like, take time back and see, like, how everything was built up, because it's just so crazy. Everything's so crazy. Like this, for example, look at how beautiful that is. It's made by human beings. Like, we did that. Damn. Definitely wasn't probably from my bloodline, because I mean, if I turned out like this, no, I'm joking, there's some art people in my bloodline as well. I'm not one of them, but yeah, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. Okay.
1740s, the colonists petitioned Parliament to put an end to the restriction. However, Oglethorpe himself continued to defend his plan, and Parliament just wasn't allowing it, so long as Spain remained a threat to the south. In the end, it was Oglethorpe's own decisive victory over Spain at the Battle of Bloody Marsh in 1746 that outright eliminated said Spanish threat, and allowed Parliament to give in to the colonists' demands, and legalize slavery in 1750, paving the way for Savannah's growth into a bustling port city. Of course, the trade-off was the essence of the Oglethorpe Plan. Wealth flooded into the streets of Savannah, Georgia. It was a
oh my god, look at that house.
Oglethorpe Plan. Wealth.
Wow. No, that even now, but back in the day, that's someone who liked to show off, because that's incredible. The way that the wall is made. What? Never have I ever seen anything like that.
Flooded into the streets of Savannah, Georgia. It was a city brimming with opportunity, mostly opportunity for the rich to get even richer. Even though Savannah's street grid remained Oglethorpean, the city itself continued to develop a lot like many other cities in the US at the time. Wards were no longer egalitarian. They were now segregated based on socioeconomic status, demographics, and even access to transportation. Different districts of industry sprouted up. Passenger rail and the streetcar lines came and went. New wards on the city's outer edges had to be compressed to fit within the Broad Street boundaries. The homes that developed there were much smaller and less desirable. You can see evidence of that in Savannah today. And at the same time, South Broad Street was expanded to be wider than any other road in the city, and so expensive homes were built along it. The outer edges of Savannah's original wards developed into main streets, specifically on Broughton and Bay Streets, respectively. It was unequal, organic, and built on the backs of slavery, but it was also picture perfect, at least from an urban planning standpoint. This is precisely why some people say that Savannah is the accidental, perfect city. None of this great urbanism was built to be great urbanism. It just sort of happened. Savannah was given a blueprint drawn up in the 1730s, and over a century later, Americans trusted it and made it their own. The result today is a city that feels more comfortable to walk in than pretty much any other city in the US. It's amazing. There's no doubt that what the Georgia trustees and James Oglethorpe laid out for Savannah in the 1730s was revolutionary. But had he gotten his way, had Savannah...
Is this supposed to be Savannah? I mean, not supposed to be. Is this, like, drawn up from Savannah?
1730s was...
No, right?
Revolutionary. But had he gotten his way, had Savannah continued to be this agrarian, egalitarian society, the city as we know it today may not have existed at all. That's a sobering thought, because the city was created after slavery. There's nothing in Savannah today that existed before then. The truth is, Savannah is a deeply antebellum town, deeply founded on slavery. The structure of the streetscape may have looked equal, but after 1750, Savannah's society was anything but. The wards continued to expand for about a century after slavery was introduced here, with the final expansion marked by the establishment of Forsyth Park in the mid-1800s. After spending some time here, I figured the best way to show you what the Oglethorpe Plan feels like today is by visiting all 24 of Savannah's historic wards, seeing up close how the system evolved, adapted, and has even been erased in some parts. While all 24 wards are technically still around, the advent of the automobile and the subsequent urban decay brought about quite a lot of change. Take any given ward. Notice how some of the tithing lots and alleyways have been altered or completely replaced by a single-use structure, oftentimes a multi-story garage. In hindsight, Savannah should have restricted zoning here, and made sure these lots were used how they were originally intended, for housing and for public use. It actually...
Savannah looks so beautiful, but well, maybe this is not the city part of it, but it doesn't look like a huge, city to me. But these neighborhoods look amazing, honestly, and all the nature that they have around. I would love to visit Savannah, and it's also a place with a bunch of history, so...
It wasn't until 1966 when Savannah's pre-Civil War boundaries were designated a National Historic Landmark District, and only in the 1970s were more stringent zoning policies implemented. Of the 24 surviving squares, 2 have been altered so heavily that they no longer function as town squares altogether. Originally laid out in 1799 and 1801 respectively, Liberty Square and Elbert Square were largely lost to road widening and urban renewal projects. They're shadows of their former selves, patches of grass along Montgomery Ave sidewalks. Savannah also temporarily lost a third square in the 1950s when Ellis Square, the city's historic market square, was filled in with a parking structure.
What? You went from this to this? No, this is a newer photo. But that's crazy work.
Historic Market Square was filled in with a parking structure. Thankfully, that was torn down in 2010, though I do think the city should consider making this 150 times greener. Ellis Square was one of the first 4 squares laid out in 1733 and was named in honor of Henry Ellis, the 6th colonial governor of Georgia. I continued to explore the city in order of when each square was established, starting with Ellis and continuing with the next 3 originals. Johnson Square is named in honor of Robert Johnson, the royal governor of South Carolina when the Georgia colony was founded. Wright Square was also built in 1733 and named for Sir James Wright, Georgia's loyalist governor during the Revolutionary War. This monument in the square honors William Washington Gordon, an early mayor of Savannah who established the Central of Georgia Railroad.
This makes Savannah so interesting as well, for someone who likes history, to walk there and see all these monuments and every square is named after someone. That's sick. That's really cool.
Telfair Square was the last of the original 4. Originally named St. James Square after a green space in London, this square was renamed in 1833 to honor the politically prominent Telfair family of antebellum-era Savannah. Like I said, 2 more squares were laid out in accordance with the Oglethorpe Plan shortly after 1733. Reynolds Square was created in 1734 and named for Georgia Governor John Reynolds. In the center stands a monument to John Wesley, the founder of Methodism and the Anglican minister to the colony from 1735 to 1738. Oglethorpe Square was laid out in 1742 in honor of, James Oglethorpe, the founder of Savannah, and the only original Georgia trustee.
I wonder where they lived in Savannah, if they had their own houses there. Probably. I mean, at least some of them obviously lived in Savannah. I mean, why would this course be named after them if not? But would be cool if their houses could be visited.
To step foot in the colony. This was the last square to be built before the Revolutionary War. The introduction of slavery, the dissolution of the Oglethorpe Plan, and the Revolutionary War itself contributed to the fact that no new squares were built for almost 50 years. But in the 1790s, 6 new squares were created. The first was Washington Square, named in honor of then-President George Washington, ahead of his visit to the city of Savannah. During his presidency, Washington toured the South, and he spent a night here in Savannah, at General Lachlan McIntosh's house along Oglethorpe Avenue. Franklin Square was created in 1791 and named in honor of Benjamin Franklin. For many years, the square was the site of the city's water tower, and was referred to as Water Tower Square. Warren Square was also created in 1791, and named in honor of General Joseph Warren, who was killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill during the Revolutionary War. Greene Square was created in 1799 to honor General Nathaniel Greene, a Revolutionary War hero who fought against the British in Savannah. Greene became one of General Washington's most talented and dependable officers, up until he died of a heat stroke at the age of 46. He was later buried beneath the monument dedicated in his honor inside Johnson Square. Columbia Square was also created.
That's a grave? That's crazy.
In 1799 and named for Columbia, the female personification of the United States. There was another brief pause in the construction of new wards, likely due to the disputes leading up to and during the War of 1812 between the US and Great Britain. Chippewa Square was laid out in 1815 and named to commemorate the Battle of Chippewa in the War of 1812. In the center stands a bronze statue of James Oglethorpe. He's positioned to face south, protecting Savannah from the Spanish in Florida. This square was also the location where they filmed the bus stop scenes in Forrest Gump in 1994. Orleans Square was created in 1815 and dedicated to Andrew Jackson's victory at the Battle of New Orleans in January of that same year. Andrew Jackson, of course, was a former Revolutionary War prisoner and future US president at the time. Lafayette Square was created in 1837 to honor the Marquis de Lafayette, the famed hero of two worlds, who came to America from France as a teenager to fight for American independence during the Revolutionary War. During his U.S. tour from 1824 to 1825, Lafayette stayed in the Owens-Thomas House on his stop in Savannah. Pulaski Square was created in 1837 and named in honor of Count Casimir Pulaski of Poland, the highest-ranking foreign officer to die in the American Revolution.
What are these trees, by the way? They're so pretty. Like, really, really pretty.
Pulaski fell during the Siege of Savannah in 1779. Pulaski is actually buried beneath Monterey Square, which we'll get to in a second. Madison Square was also created in 1837 and named in honor of James Madison, America's fourth president. In the center stands a monument of Sergeant William Jasper, who also fell during the Siege of Savannah in 1779. Crawford Square was created in 1841 and named in honor of William Harrison Crawford, American minister to France during the reign of Napoleon. Chatham Square was created in 1847 and named in honor of William Pitt, the Earl of Chatham. Pitt was an early supporter of the colony, and although he never visited Savannah, Chatham County, where Savannah lies, was also named in his honor. Monterey Square was also created in 1847 and was named to commemorate the American victory at the Battle of Monterey during the Mexican-American War. Troup Square was created in 1851 and named in honor of George Michael Troup, a senator and governor of Georgia. Taylor Square, formerly known as Calhoun Square, was created in 1841 too, originally named in honor of John C. Calhoun, a South Carolina statesman and vice president under John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. And last but not least, Whitefield Square was the third and final square to be created in 1851, named in honor of Reverend George Whitefield, founder of the Bethesda Orphanage, the oldest orphanage in the U.S., located just outside of the Savannah city limits. After a steady decline in population during the 20th century, Savannah is now steadily growing. It may be obvious that the future of Savannah's success lies in what's already been laid out for it, tearing up the parking structures, parking lots, and car-centric buildings, and replacing them based off of the very plan it claims it wants to protect. Fill in those tithing blocks with Victorian Revival-style mixed-use apartments and townhomes. Keep Savannah beautiful, but keep it growing sustainably at the same time. Let new neighborhood small businesses fill in those ground floors within the trust blocks, so that the city can grow a new local economy, not solely based on tourism and the past. The past can inspire Savannah's future, but it doesn't have to be its future altogether. The city should absolutely prioritize allowing more town square-facing adaptive reuse, so that these squares truly feel like unique and individual neighborhoods. Look, Savannah is a different city than it was in 1733, 1833, and 1933. It's no utopia, but it's also no longer part of the pro-slave Confederacy. If you've never been to Savannah, I highly recommend it. Visit all
I feel like Savannah does look like someone's like dream place to live. Maybe not mine. Do you want to go to Savannah? No. I feel like I would like to be in either a suburb or like somewhere that's like out of any city, but that does look like an ideal place for someone, you know? Like I'm not surprised that Savannah is gonna like it's growing and is probably gonna be booming soon again.
24 town squares, and you'll understand exactly what I mean when I say Savannah is the most accidentally perfect anti-city in America today. I'll see you next week, right here, from 4th place.
I love those trees. Well, guys, that was the America's Perfect Anti-City. I'm so sorry that I didn't have much to say about this video, but I mean, what is there to say? What is there to say? I'm out of it today. But thank you either way for joining me. I hope you still enjoyed it. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys in the next video.